Hey everyone, this is Zephyr, with the first in a multi-part series on creating an adventure for your party using the Baileywiki Modular Town System. In this first video, we'll go over initial setup and create the first scene in a multi-scene town. We will cover adding in terrain, prefabricated buildings and clutter, sound design, and creating NPCs and quick encounters. First, we're going to start with this scene that my party last ended on. This is a beach, is a modification of the sample beach included in the Modular Town folder. I'm first creating a multi-level token zone that will take us to the first scene in our town. After I have my multi-level token zone set up, I'm tweaking the drawing settings, and then I'm going to be creating the first scenes for the town. To set up the scenes, I'm going into my scene directory and adding some new scenes into the folder. I'm just going to call it the name of the town, 01, etc. I want to set the width to 30 by 30 grid units so it's not too intensive on my players' computers. For my background, I'm going into my modules, Baileywiki Maps, Premium Towns, Maps, Wilderness, Terrains, and then in the Ocean and Sand to pick the large sandy background. Then I'm just going to copy this scene and make 3 versions of it for the backgrounds. I may go back and change those later, but this is the good starting point. After my first scenes are set up, I'm going to go ahead and wall them all off. Since I will be using prefabs that have level data on them, I want to make sure levels and better roofs work properly. And then I'm adding in multi-level token teleportation between the first scene in the town and the beach. I've imported the Baileywiki Maps town journal entries so that I can use the stair entry. That way my players will have access to it, and it's already something that I'm going to be using frequently anyway. If you ever want to look at the different icons that are available to you for map notes, go into the core data in Foundry and look in the icons and SVG folder. Now I'm going to get started with terrain. There are options in the prefabs for trees and such, but the main thing we want is to go into the module folder, and in the terrains, there are different spots. The same place where we found that initial background image that we're using for these scenes, we can find these sand dunes and water spots. So I'm just going through and selecting those, rotating them, finding the ones that I want, and then looking through the different options. For paths, I need to go back up to the town square and then paths and roads. And here I can find a large variety of paths. I don't want this to be cobblestone. I want it to kind of be like trodden dirt or something like that. So I'm sticking only to these paths that are on the upper portion in the tile browser. You can tweak the size of these by changing the grid size that's used. A larger number means the tile is going to come out smaller. A smaller number means the tile is going to be bigger once you drop it into the scene. And you can rotate these just like you would with the token. If you need to mirror a tile, simply double click on it to open up the tile menu. And then depending on which axis you want to rotate it on, the length or the height, then make the value for the width or height negative while leaving the other positive, and that'll flip it. You do get some strange behavior as you move it around though, so use this sparingly. Now that I have my initial terrain set up, I'm going to start picking out my buildings. So I'm going into my compendiums and looking in the Maps Town prefabs. Here there's a variety of folders to browse through if you're not sure the flavor you want to apply to your town or scene. In this case, I already know that I want this to have a desert feel. I'm going for kind of an island that's an oasis sort of vibe. And with that, I'm dragging in all of the desert shops. So you can use the search tool in the compendium. That's a really easy way to find a variety of buildings at different classes. And I'm placing these different prefab structures using token attacher. And all of these can be manipulated like regular tokens, just holding down Control and scrolling the mouse wheel will rotate them. I'm also making a note of these different structures that I really like, but don't necessarily fit into my idea of this particular scene. And sometimes I'm dragging them in just to get an idea of what they are and understand how much space they take up, rather than actively seeking to put them on this scene. I know I want to use bathhouses, for example, within this town, but I'm not going to have them on this first scene. This first scene, I want to be mostly smaller shops and homes. So that's what you'll see me picking out and dragging in here. After I've brought in a few of these different buildings, I want to tweak the terrain a little bit to have the path spots kind of line up for edges of buildings and flow more directly to and from the buildings. So I'm going back in my tile picker and going back into those roads and paths that are under the town square MISC2 file. Once all of the paths make sense and look good to me, then I'm going to pause on the terrain again and revisit that after I add in some greenery and some other clutter. I might still do some tweaks, but for the most part, the terrain is set. For the greenery and clutter, I'm going back into my town prefabs compendium, and I'm grabbing some of the jungle foliage. The jungle foliage is what's going to really fit the oasis kind of vibe that I'm going for here. Occasionally, I'm also looking at my terrains for the first in different spots. I'm going back into the water and looking at my different options there and decide that the ocean one is the best one for the job. I'm going to add like a little pool here to, again, really fit with that oasis theme, and it'll work well with bathhouses that I incorporate later. Another nice trick is that thanks to Token Attacher, you can actually resize things on the fly. So while I'm adding in these other pieces, I'm not super happy with ones to go around kind of the edge of this pond. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually change the width and height of the token for this cluster of jungle growth. And that will shrink it enough so that the curvature fits really nicely around this water spot and really gives the idea of this grown-up edge to it. Again, with the greenery all set up, I'm going to revisit my terrain and go back into my tile picker in the paths and roads. And I'm going to, again, tweak those to make sure everything looks good and so that the growth kind of nicely borders some of the walkways, and make sure that all of the different door stops and everything have a bit of trodden earth around them to really emphasize that traffic goes in and out of those. When I'm happy again with my changes to the terrain, it's time to add in a little bit of clutter. I don't really want to add too much here, so while I'm looking at a few different options, I'm going to keep it simple. Then if I want to add in some effects like this nice billowing smoke, I can go into the tile picker once again, and I can find the animated Gorgon assets in the Maps Premium Towns, and it's under the Maps under Animated Gorgon. And then I've kind of decided, now that I've laid out this scene, on exactly where I want my different ways to the other scenes to be. So I'm going ahead and adding in my MLT zones for those. They're not going to be used just yet, but they'll be in place for when I'm ready for them. After I'm happy with the layout, I'm going to use a test actor to get an idea of the scene. And here I notice my first issue, and on the scene I have darkness and everything, but I don't have an unlimited vision range, and so the tokens can't actually see very far. So I'm going to set that up on the scene so that even my characters that don't have dark vision are able to see during the day. So I'm going through and checking the buildings, making sure everything makes sense, and I don't have any really obvious or glaring issues. As I'm going around, I like how the space flows in these different buildings and the layout of the town in general. I do notice that this is my second bakery in the scene, so this is a really important reason to do testing early, is decide on the bones of your scene early on and make adjustments before you get too deep. So here I'm getting rid of the bakery, and instead I'm going to put in a mead hall, like this one from Abominable Rob. Every town needs a tavern, and this seems like a good place for one, and I really like the layout of this particular building having this angled entryway. So I'm settling on that, making some more tweaks to make sure that all of the terrain and paths fit how I like, mostly just moving things around as opposed to adding in new things. Next, I really want to make this water look lively, and I'm going to be doing some more sound work. So first, I'm drawing a polygon with my drawing tool. I'm going to use multi-level token to add the walking water macro here. And I can either type it in or I can copy paste it, as long as it matches the name of the macro I have. And you can hear that this plays a variety of sounds. There's random sounds as I walk in, out, and around. To really fill out the sound, I'm adding in some more ambient sounds, and here you can see me going through the different sound options that are within the Premium Maps Towns folder. They're all under sounds, and I'm trying them out. If you have the preview audio sounds enabled, looks like headphones beneath the Draw Ambient Sound icon in your sounds tool, then you can hover your mouse to hear what they sound like. I've settled on these waves coming from the beach. I also noticed that the walls over here are blocking sound, so I want to turn that off. After I've gotten all of my sounds set up, then I'm going to do a quick test. If you have the preview sounds on, then you can hover everywhere and make sure they sound good, and I can adjust volumes. I'm going to move my character through and test the layout again and make sure things feel immersive as I'm moving around, and maybe settle down for a drink. The next thing I'd like to take care of is adding in a basement to this house that has a multi-level token zone for a basement, but I'm going to use levels here. So the first thing I want to do is go into my prefabs folder and again, look in the modular basements of the town prefabs and find one that I like. Kind of settled on this L-shaped one. And next I want to set things up for levels. I'm going into my levels config and adding in a basement level. Notice if I drop in any of these basements that the walls are set to infinity infinity. I don't want that, but Levels has this awesome trick with prefabs. If I have my basement level active, you'll notice that all of the walls obey the confines of that particular level configuration. So I can rotate my basement and move it into place, and it will be already set up for levels. I want to make sure I line it up for exactly where that trapdoor is, as my level stairs need to be only up and down and not change positions. You'll notice that all of the walls in the prefab have the same height as the level. So if you want to have a differing height in the middle of it, such as with these crates, you'll need to adjust that manually. Keep in mind if you're building walls on a level to obstruct vision or obstruct movement, that you want to keep in mind your default token height. You can check and configure that by going into your configure settings, module settings, and going into the level settings and looking at the default token height. With the walls taken care of, next I'm going to go ahead and delete the journal entries for multi-level token, since we'll be using levels stairs. Then I need to change the tile to an overhead tile, make it show for the better roof mode, and turn it into a basement. That way it will be hidden from view unless my players are actively on the level of the basement. Then I just need to drop in a stairs drawing, and you can see our character pops right in, no problem. But when they're not in the basement, it's completely hidden, even though the tiles for the building aren't directly over top of the basement. It is hidden beneath the background of the map. After making some final adjustments, our basement powered by levels is ready to go. If you don't want to include a basement, then you can go into your actors compendium and grab one of the modular basement entrances that is a closed hatch and cover up the entrance while deleting the multi-level token drawing and journal entry. Alternatively, you can go into your tile browser and grab one of the trap doors that are from the modular basements and size it to fit the opening, and then delete stock multi-level token drawing and journal entry. Now let's add some life to our town by adding in some NPCs. I've imported a commoner here from my D&D Beyond imports. You could also grab this from the D&D 5e SRD. Within the Baileywiki modules, there's actually a token setting inside of the premium towns, and you can grab all kinds of different top-down tokens from Forgotten Adventures to make NPCs for your area. And here I brought in a cook, and I'm going to update the prototype token settings to show the name when hovered by owner. You'll see I'm also using the token mold module so that I can randomize names, so that I don't have to be that clever with NPC names when my players come through here. Another great way to add variance to your tokens and NPCs is to randomize the wildcard images here on the prototype token. There are multiple cook tokens within the Baileywiki Towns module, so we just add an asterisk before the word cook and after the word cook in the file path, then you'll see that it picks between a human and a halfling cook that will pop up. So I can change those different images, and this will work not only in the Baileywiki Towns module, but in any other directory that you have your token image in. This is a great way to add a lot of variance and texture to your NPCs without having to add a lot of work. I'm going through and I'm making a few other versions of common NPCs. I know I want fishermen and barkeepers and servers and merchants. So I'm going through and adding those and finding good places to put them in this scene. Some of these characters I know I'm not going to include on this particular scene, but we're getting some of that work out of the way now so that it's ready to go for later. Before you go placing NPCs throughout your entire scene, you'll also want to make sure that you have them flagged as neutral or friendly and configure their name and resource, i.e. health bar, display according to your liking. After I've added all these NPCs, I want to have a way to clear this scene in case I'm not going to use the same batch of NPCs or I want to do another social encounter here. So I'm going to use quick encounters by selecting all of my NPCs, and then I'm going to just click the quick encounters button and create a journal entry for myself that gives me a little bit of a prompt to what the general vibe of the scene is. So using this quick encounter, I am going to be able to generate a map note that I can double click on, give myself some information about the town, and then I can hit run quick encounter. And in this case, whenever it fills up the combat tracker, I'm simply going to empty the combat tracker since these NPCs are not going to be actual combatants. To remind myself that this is a friendly encounter, or at the worst, a neutral encounter, I'm going to go ahead and change my map note to green so it doesn't look the same as the hostile encounters that we're about to create. So with all of our friendly characters in play, it's time to set up some hostile encounters. I want there to be a pirate attack that happens on this island. I think that the bandits and bandit captains from the 5e SRD look kind of piratey, so I'm going to use those to build out my encounter. First, I'm going to import one of each instead of dragging in every time and creating multiple instances of the bandit and captain in my actors directory. Then I'll drag the two versions that I've imported and I will place them in my scene. Once I'm happy with it, then I'm going to actually create the encounters. I think in this situation, I want to have kind of a forward party that might also act as reinforcements in a different encounter as one area, and then I'm going to put the other pirates in a separate encounter. This way I can have one wave in an encounter and then have a follow-up wave, maybe during the encounter, or I can have a separate scenario entirely. This keeps things flexible for me. I'm not overdoing it on the amount of bandits here either. My party is currently fairly low level, so I want this to be a good introductory adventure as opposed to a meat grinder or intense combat. There'll be a boss fight later for that. And with that, we've concluded the first part of this series on creating an adventure. We've created a new multi-scene setup for a small town that then links back to an existing location that our party is going to enter from. We've made the first scene in that town complete prefabricated buildings, working basements via levels, a host of NPCs, and we have combat encounters planned. It's even better, this only took me about an hour or two, and I can run multiple sessions out of just this scene alone. And that's not even including the other two scenes we're going to build out to complete the town and add in some quest lines. This has been Zephyr, and I hope that this has been helpful to you. Thanks so much for watching. Stay tuned for the next parts in the video series where we will finish up the town and add some other locations for a quest and a boss battle. Thanks again, and have a good one.